academic chair of the Institute for Eurasian and Jewish Studies. It's a research center based in Israel. He's also the chief scientist for the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. That's part of the Israeli government that deals with issues of concern for diaspora communities around the world. So Zev is an expert on these issues, originally born in the former Soviet Union. We met at St. Anthony's College in 1980 something or other. And so it's really, and Zev has been teaching on the program, I think every year since its inception. So it's really wonderful to have Zev back to discuss a part of the world that we really haven't looked at yet. So thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's great to see all of you again, and it's great to be again here in this program. I think I believe it's one of the best, if not the best program of this kind that exists in the academic world. And thanks to Charles and to Ira and all the colleagues for inviting me again in order to present the results of a couple of my recent studies. I just finished research in the former Soviet Union, quite big quantitative research of Jewish communities and non-Jewish communities in 4 former Soviet republics, including Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova. And actually that's the first time that I published these results here in this audience. And I hope not just to get your attention, which I would appreciate, of course, but also your critique and your comments concerning the interpretation of the facts that we got in the course of this and other studies. Okay, so I'm going to say a few words about in the next hour about the contemporary trend of anti-Semitism in the FSU, but looking at that on a couple of different sides, including how Jews see it and how what is the vision of non-Jewish community concerning Jews, and how these both subjects reflect their understanding, their interactions through their vision of Israel and anti-Israelism, which still exists in certain circles of FSU population. So, on one hand, if we will have a look at this, something incorrect happened. In any event, the FSU is actually is the home of not more than 5% of the whole Jewish population in the world. If you will add to that those who meet the regulations of the Israeli law of return, that could be a little bit more, but 3/4 of their diaspora Jewish community actually live in 2 North American countries, which are United States and Canada. Still, 75% of Aliyah to Israel, meaning Jewish emigration of the recent 30 years, they came from the former Soviet Union. So if we are talking about 3 major pillars of the Jewish world in our days, meaning Israel, diaspora, and Jewish Aliyah, Jewish immigration, so they speak 3 different languages. Israel mostly speaks Hebrew, diaspora mostly speaks English, and Aliyah mostly speaks Russian. So it's pretty important for us to understand what is the context of the existence of the Jewish communities in the former Soviet Union, what makes them to stay, and what makes them to live. Mainly, not for the West, like it used to be in 1970s and 80s, but predominantly to the state of Israel. In principle, if you will have a look, the post-Soviet space is believed to be a secure island in terms of classical anti-Semitism. If you will have a look what is going on in comparison to Europe, for example, you see 2 results of the 2 studies. European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights 2018 survey in 12 European countries, and in comparison with the Levada Center research in Russia, you will see that in 8 West European, Central European countries, 44% of local Jews believe that anti-Semitism sharply increased in their countries, and only 5% in Russia. Of course, the understanding of anti-Semitism is always a sort of a subjective issue, meaning there is an anti-Semitism which you could live with and you are unable to live with. you may say that Soviet and post-Soviet Jews who are used to anti-Semitism, they may pay less attention to the issues which are regarded to be unacceptable, unstandable in the Western world. But still, if you will have a look at these figures, you will see that probably there is a problem, an even bigger problem in the Western world than in the so-called anti-Semitic world, which it used to be, which the Soviet Union was regarded to be. You see here that still more than 40% of those Jews who live in Russia, they believe that anti-Semitism remained the same, and about quarter slightly decreased. So we see the sort of stabilization vis-a-vis the increase in the Western world, but not the sharp decrease of anti-Semitism there in any event. In the public opinion, the explanation is, to my mind, and not only to my mind, but including all the opinions of the colleagues that study the issue in Russia, they believe that in the public opinion, Jews stopped being a specific ethnically and socially marked group that focus on themselves or channelize political and national determined aggressiveness. Instead of Jews, they have now other enemies, meaning migrants from the Middle East, migrants from the Central Asia, Muslims. They have conflict, they have new enemies, new old enemies like Europe and especially the United States. They have new enemy like Baltic states and Ukraine concerning Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Oh, okay, so, oh, thanks. So Jews actually not the first in line. Whether it's for good or for worse, let's have a look. If you will have a look on their conclusions of various international bodies that follow and research the anti-Semitism and tolerance in the former Soviet republics, you see here that this rosy picture not necessarily meet their conclusions. For example, in April last year, there was a famous letter of 57 United States congressmen who signed this letter to USA Department of State, who expressed their concern about gross anti-Semitism in the FSU, especially in Russia and Ukraine. The World Anti-Semitism report, which from time to annually issued by Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, they also show that this picture is not so exact, meaning that everything is fine and nothing should be taken care of. They pay attention to various types of incidents in 2017 and also which are continuing in 2018. Vandalism, anti-Semitic propaganda, which means blaming Jews for all the problems of their country and all the problems of the world. Especially an explosion of this feeling we saw after downloading of Russian plane in Syria with the help of the missiles that were supplied by Russia to Syrian army, which actually destroyed the Russian plane, and a Russian Defense Ministry didn't find anything better than to blame Israel, Israeli Air Force, as if the Israeli plane, Israeli F-16, hide it behind. It's not, yeah, hide it behind this slow Russian plane. I was that time in one of the Russian federal TV channels, which asked me to explain why Israel is in war with Russia. I had to explain that Russia is not in war. Israel is not in the battle with Russia. Actually, Israel is just defending their own interests, and no Russian soldier was damaged in staying in Syria, was damaged by an Israeli. However, for me it was a bad surprise, I will tell you the truth, that as for the person who thought that this classical Soviet-style anti-Semitism is already behind us. It was like an explosion of that. However, when Mr. Putin said, guys, enough is enough, we have to, relax a little bit and understand what happened. And of course, in the extremely democratic country, all the media immediately stopped blaming Israel for that, but we understand that everything is there, still there. It's hidden under the ground, but if the policy change, we will hope it will not happen. We will see. We could be surprised a little bit here what is going on there. Other reports also show that we should pay more attention what is really going on the level of the grass, and including the reports of the Tel Aviv University Counter Center and the report commissioned by the Russian Jewish Congress, which, as you can see here, registered a growing number of hate declarations by politicians and public figures, which was a very popular popular phenomenon last year and also this year, in the beginning of this year. Still, it was also a not so good surprise for the Russian establishment and also for Jewish establishment of these countries, which believe that all these conclusions blaming Russian establishment and Ukrainian and other republics and in general all East European countries like Poland, leadership of the Baltic states that are not doing enough to prevent anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic events. They disagree with that, believing that all these conclusions are exaggerated and show their figures that insist on the fact that in principle the anti-Semitism is decreasing. For instance, Ukrainian journalists and officials quote the Pew Research Center research, which showed that the level of anti-Semitism in Ukraine is the lowest, meaning in comparison to all post-communist world. Only 5% of Ukrainians expressed this or that anti-Semitic sentiments, which is a good news, of course. But the question, but not everybody agree with that conclusion of this Pew Center either. Of course, this battle was joined by the Jewish public figures of both countries and other countries of the FSU. You see here Mikhail Chlenov, who is chairman of the Jewish autonomy, National Jewish Autonomy of the Russian Federation, and one of the leaders of the Eurasian Jewish Congress. And you see here the chairman of a very symbolic figure who spent in prison for national and human rights activities in the Soviet prison. Joseph Zissels, the chairman of the Association of Jewish Organizations and Communities of Ukraine, who insisted that in fact that's just the politics, nothing special happens, and in fact the efforts to decrease the level of the anti-Semitism bring fruits. They also show political figures of the Jewish origin who actually have Jewish roots. Take, for example, Ukraine. You probably recognize the faces of these guys here. You have three figures: current president of this country, of Ukraine. You have Vladimir Zelensky. You have Prime Minister of Ukraine, Vladimir Groisman, and you have a mayor of the capital, mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, a person also with the Jewish roots. So if Ukrainians are anti-Semitic nations, how happens that three key political positions in their country are captured by Jews, which actually compose less than 0.5% of the Ukrainian population. But on the other hand, they are about 5%, 10 times more in the Ukrainian parliament, and about 10%, which means 20 times more in the Ukrainian government. How it comes together? It's really a good question. So you could believe that Jews should be a part of your political landscape, but still have some anti-Semitic sentiments. That's also possible. However, it could be also said that in fact, if there is an anti-Semitism in this country, it should be regarded as a new form, which is much more close to what happens in the West rather than took place in the former Soviet Union, in the Soviet times. Or just to agree with those who say all the stories behind us and anti-Semitism in this country are not an issue anyway at the moment. The same story you have in Russia. You probably recognize this politician, Mr. Vladimir Putin, yeah? Who always shows himself, likes to show himself together with Jews, especially Chabad Jews, he visits Jewish religious and culture institutions, contributed by himself something of his salary to the Museum of Jewish History, Holocaust, and Tolerance. All the time insists that he sees the Jews as equal among the equal and stands against anti-Semitism. Hopefully, this opinion actually corresponds also to the most of the Russian population. The question is whether it's true. Despite all the declarations, and we will ask the question, where is the truth? In order to answer this question, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, when we all teach our students, we have first of all to explain what we mean while we're saying the word anti-Semitism, or what sort of events or phenomenon we mean while saying that. By saying that, we first of all mean three issues. First, acts of physical violence against Jews, damage to synagogues, community centers, all these Jewish objects, and anti-Semitic or neo-Nazi propaganda, graffiti and other forms of the propaganda. Lo chaser, like we say in Hebrew, it's not lacking in the post-Soviet space. You see here, just before coming here, just take randomly recent pictures from the internet, and you see here, Death to Kayaks is still there. This is their monument to Jewish victims of the Holocaust. In these two cases, this is in Ternopil, and this is in a Russian city. You see here, Death to Kayaks in one of the on the wall of yeshiva in Moscow, in Moscow suburb. So from this point of view, damage to synagogue and anti-Semitic graffiti is still there. The question is, should we take it into account seriously or understand it as a sort of a marginal issue? For some marginal groups, which should not be taken too seriously, okay, the government should take care about it, but it doesn't reflect the mainstream vision of the local society. If we were talking about the first point, acts of anti-Semitic violence, in fact, the number of these incidents and numbers of anti-Semitic vandalism in the FSU in the recent decade indeed was not so dramatic. You see it here that it's from 9 to 24, 28 cases in Ukraine and from 6 to 7 cases a year in Russia. Okay, happens. It's less than happens in any given West European country, for example. The Russian Jewish Congress suggests that the level of anti-Semitic violence in the recent 2 years was lower than the previous year. Last year and this year, they never accounted even single physical attack against a Jew, which could be, of course, praised and welcome. Regarding Ukraine's systematic monitoring, which started 15 years ago, they also show that at the end of the last decade, there was a wave of anti-Semitic street attacks. However, at the end of the last decade, until the mid this decade, it was a sharp decrease. In the past 10 years, the number of such incidents remained stably low, as they say, according to the report of Eurasian Jewish Congress. And the Ukrainian Congress of Ethnic Minorities, they also show that these cases are not so numerous. Of course, attention should be paid to each of them. Even one is too many, yeah. But still, there is no space, as they insist, for exaggeration and dramatization of this event. Just to show in the table, you can see here that there is a substantial difference between monitoring institutions. That's in blue. You see the monitoring on the local parties, and in red, if it's red, bit something between red and rose, you see the results of the monitoring of Israeli parties. The question is, why is there a substantial difference? The difference is that our Ukrainian and Russian colleagues, they insist that while we are talking about anti-Semitic incidents, we should take into account hate crime. Israelis insist that it should also hate speech should be taken into account. Hate speech which bring not just remains on the level of speech, but also brings some results, including a uncomfortable situation for this or that, for specific Jewish communities. And it's also a methodological question we should ask by ourselves. When we're explaining on the academic level the question of anti-Semitism, what sort of anti-Semitism should be considered as dangerous, and what sort of the part of, the questions that need to be taken care of through the education system, but not over-dramatized. If we will have a look and at Israeli study of one of very important Israeli government sources entrusted to follow up the situation in the former Soviet Union, you see that their figures are substantially different because they take into account also other events that could be anti-Semitic also in the United States, in France, in Germany, in Italy, and in other countries of the Western world. From their point of view, Ukraine is leading with 120, then Russia with 55, and less in some other countries, including Uzbekistan, the Muslim Republic, which is believed to be anti-Semitic less, meaning country which is free from anti-Semitism. But still that sort of a nationalistic based on anti-Semitism harassment, they registered somehow one of these events. And even more in the rest of the post-Soviet republics. It's also the question of very hot, sharp criticism and hot discussions between the Israeli parties and local Jewish bodies, and of course government bodies of the post-Soviet republics. So hate crime or also hate speech. As I said, United Jewish Community of Ukraine believes that hate speech should not be overestimated. The same discussion we had in a very important event which annually takes place in Moscow. There is an international conference combating anti-Semitism named Protecting the Future. So in Jerusalem, Charles and me observed this confrontation between government officials of the former Soviet republics, local Jewish bodies, and in the Israeli government bodies, which tried to persuade the other side that they either too careful about it or not enough careful about the issue. If so, if we will stand on the opinion of their Israeli government bodies, you will see that the mostly observed categories of anti-Semitism in the FSU are crimes inspired by Judophobia, incitements to hostility against the Jews, media-sponsored public anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitic stereotypes. All this list is long enough in order to be careful about what we are saying and how we're defining this issue. I'm trying to, in my research, I'm trying to answer this pretty long list of questions. What Jews mean for a local society, actually. Whether it's still visible or invisible body. Whether it's, if they do not channelize their hatred and problematic status in the moment of the local societies, if it's not channelized toward Jews, whether it might change in the future. and whether anti-Semitism in the former Soviet states is just the echo of the past, or we can anticipate, we can expect that something will come back in the future. Another point which should be taken into account, that anti-Semitism became a tool of the conflicts between former Soviet republics and post-communist states. Of course, you know that in the recent 5 or 6 years, there is an unpronounced, undeclared war between Russia and Ukraine, like it was in 10 years ago, 11 years ago, between Russia and Georgia. And you have a very funny phenomenon there. Everybody, each side, uses the tool of anti-Semitism, but against the enemy. They proclaim the enemy an anti-Semitic body. So we love Jews, and they anti-Semites, which has nothing to do with Jews themselves, you know. One of my colleagues, Vyacheslav Likhachev, calls this phenomenon instrumental anti-Semitism, which has very little, if anything, to do with Jews. It has very much to do with the political enemy. When you describe the political enemy as the anti-Semitic and fascist regime, you can win this game, this fight for the world public opinion. And that's what really happens quite often in the former Soviet republics. And of course, there is a good question whether we still are dealing with the classical anti-Semitism or a new form of anti-Semitism, including anti-Zionism. So the question is, you see here the long list of sources. My research, other research, just wanted to show it to you that all this, I'm not just dreaming, you know, I'm trying to bring as much data as possible in order to prove this or that conclusion. But the question really is what the general public thinks about Jews. You can see here the results of the Levada Public Opinion Research Center, one of the very respectable Russian public opinion bodies, now in the list of foreign agents, according to the Russian government, but still they're working very effectively. It's like, I would say that's the Russian version of the American Pew Center. More or less the same level of qualification and importance of the data they publish. So you can see here that Jews are actually not the first in line, you know, concerning their attitude, negative estimation summary, negative attitude concerning their various ethnic groups. You see here that over all these years, Chechen rebels are leading, especially, of course, in the years of First and Second Russian-Chechen War, the Second Russian-Chechen War. On the second place, you have people from, you have now Americans, the new old enemy, then Arabs. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, well, I would better say nothing about it. But they believe not Arabs that they are, they believe Arabs that come there in order to inspire the local Islamist infrastructure to fight against the Russian society, for instance, here. Then you see Georgians, new enemies, concerning the results of the Russian-Georgian War, and then classical racism. Africans and Estonians, which are the part of the European Union, former Soviet Republic, which became like a proponent of the Western European opposition against, as they see it, attempts of the contemporary Russian administration government to re-establish their influence on the old territories that used to be part of the former Soviet Union. So Jews are the last in line. Should we be happy about that? Let's wait a second and have a look on other data. Still, okay, again, this is the result of the study of the recent year. And again, you see that Jews are also last in line, the same 10%. The first in line are actually classical phenomenon of hatred, ethnic hatred, which are Roma, gypsies. Again, you know, just you saw that in figures, and just to make it like in conclusions, you will see here that Roma and Chechens provoke the biggest negativism, Americans, current political enemy, cultural and religious strangers, Arabs and Azerbaijanians, and the Islamic factor here is much more important than the ethnic one, as you understand. However, remnants of historical enmity, like they put it, both traditional and the Soviet state anti-Semitism are still very visible. And my second conclusion is that it can be seen, regardless to support some ethnic discrimination policy, in readiness, I understand. That in principle, according to the polls, Russian citizens still ready to support in some way, not all of them, probably not majority of them, but still substantial share in the population. They believe that they are ready to support some ethnic discrimination policy. If it's going to be some indication or some message from the Russian authorities. The moment Russian authorities say no, it doesn't happen. In case they will say yes, they might find fruitful for them, the society would probably be ready to support. That's the conclusion of Levada Center. If you will have a look on this study, whether there is the same situation in Ukraine, there is no reliable, comprehensive research that was done in the recent 5 or 6 years. But I asked my Ukrainian colleagues to do like a pilot in a couple of cities of the eastern Ukraine, where the majority of Ukrainian Jews are concentrated, like cities like Dnipropetrovsk, former East Ukrainian city, and they see that negative attitudes is actually proclaimed by minority of the local non-Jewish population. Overwhelming majority doesn't have either positive or negative attitude toward Jews. If we will have a look at the table, that's the situation in Russia. You can see here that negative estimation sum in 2018 was the same 10%. You know, the highest was in 2002, you know, it's okay. So the fifth of the respondents referred to Jews in Ukraine with annoyance, distrust, and fear. That means the strong core of anti-Semitism, that's about 20%, probably, in the Ukrainian society. Slightly more than 12%, there's a strong core of Philo-Semites, meaning they express the interest and sympathy. And 70% a neutral approach. However, the level of intolerance among the elder respondents was higher than among the youngsters. Always a good indication whether representatives of the local population are ready to see Jews as their colleagues, as their partners, and especially as their national leaders, meaning leaders of their country. So it's always good to have a look what happens when you ask people whether you're ready that a Jew will be the president of your country or will be prime minister of your country. And you see here that, when you ask question not about yourself, but you ask question about, you ask a respondent to make an estimation of the level of the share of anti-Semites in the society. Okay, suppose you are a nice guy, but what do you think about others? You can see here that very few in Russia believe that almost everybody, every member of the local society is anti-Semite. However, you have between 15%, 14% to 20% that they believe that there is more than a half like that, you know. So all in all, you make like a quarter, between 20% to quarter. They say, okay, quarter of our society are accented anti-Semites. And 20 years on, in 1990, you see, that's just on the eve of the destruction of the Soviet Union. The fifth believed that there is that very few are anti-Semites. Nowadays, about half believe in that. That means that it's going to be like a positive development. It's interesting also that about 20 years ago, about 30 years ago, for them it was very difficult to estimate how many actually was the story concerning the public attitude toward Jews. At the moment, this is actually the minority. You see here that in Ukraine, in comparison to Russia, it's more or less the same story. So people believe that their society they live in have a strong core of anti-Semites, but in general, the society is not anti-Semitic. But but if we will have a look more carefully to the structure of the society in concern of these anti-Semitic sentiments and activities, according to the Levada researchers, which I agree, actually, it's also proved by my study, they believe there are three different groups. You have, as I said, the strong core of the Russian citizens, which are accented anti-Semite, between 8 to 16%. For example, one of elements that prove their approach, anti-Semitic approach, is their positive answer to the question whether do we believe that the government should limit the number of Jews at the public managerial positions. And in fact, should Jews be equal part of the public decision process, or political decision-making process. Within recent 20 years, 25 years, those who believe in that, answer this question positively, grew for 10%, as you can see. And first of all, at the expense of those who didn't have opinion on the eve of their dispersion of the Soviet Union. The second group are actually those who are between 20% to 1/3. That's moderate strata, less stable anti-Semitic anti-Jewish attitudes. They believe that they express antipathy, but not so, formulated and accepted one. One of the examples concerning the opinions of this group are actually positive answer to the question whether Jews are mostly loyal to their own interests, and the own interest means personal interests, community interests, and interests of the Jewish state, rather than interests of the society, state, and society they live in. Catastrophe. Half believe in that. The Jews do not live loyal to the society they live in. For me, it was a very sad surprise. I will tell you the truth. I did think that all this is behind us. It is still there. And the third group, like I would call it cloud, that between 40 to 65%. Those who are negative reactions were not addressed namely to Jews, but they express, I would say, their concern about the current situation in the society. And it's not necessarily channelized to Jews, but could channelize if they will see it like if focus will be on this ethnic and religious group. This group actually of respondents, they believe that the status and the rights of the titular nation, mean Lithuanians in Lithuania, Russians in Russia, Uzbeks in Uzbekistan, should be promoted before the status of other ethnic groups or ethnic minorities in these countries. For instance, in Russia, this group believes that ethnic Russians might enjoy priorities before other groups, and even more, it's more than 40% in this country, but even more in the big population centers like capital of Moscow, as you see, about 60%. And about 70% of the respondents believe it is undesirable that a Jew becomes the president of the Russian Federation. Of course, you know that it doesn't help. Probably 1/3 of the Russian population believe that Vladimir Putin is Jewish, which has nothing to do with reality. But in fact, he meets the Jewish leadership 3 or 4 times a year. That's enough to blame him in Jewish roots. However, these figures actually show by themselves. Coming back to Ukraine, you see here that you can see that actually those who hold the anti-Semitic attitudes are actually the same people, like in Russia, like in other post-Soviet republics, who hold general xenophobic feelings. That means, from this point of view, anti-Semitism is a part of the general xenophobia, which we shouldn't be surprised about that. However, I believe that the situation in Ukraine is a little bit more complicated, and it's more complicated especially in the recent years, which is a result of this complexity is the result of recent events. A revolution of dignity, conflict with Russia, uneasy relations with the rest of the Soviet republics and with the European Union and the United States. Public opinion polls of the 14 and 16, they show on one hand an improvement of public opinion toward Jews. On the other hand, anti-Semitism became more visible in the public sphere. How we can explain this issue? Okay, the level of the share of anti-Semites in the society is decreasing, but those who are remaining, they believe that they have right to express it more than it used to be before. Again, a very interesting sociological phenomenon, or even anthropological phenomenon. It's interesting to discuss and to research for us as the scholars, but we have to also to think about those who live with that. One of the biggest problems when we take these figures into account is the question of dual loyalty. We are talking about, as you know, we are also talking about whether Jews are loyal to the society they live in, or they are more loyal to the society that, or to the state of Israel, or their own community. In principle, if you will have a look on the Russian data, you see that, as I said before, about half of the Russian population believe that they're more loyal to their own interests and the interest of the Jewish state rather than the society they live in, which has nothing to do with the reality, by the way. Here is my study earlier this year. I just finished it in April this year. And you see here, dear colleagues, that between 70 to 85% of the Jewish population of 3 former Soviet republics, especially in Russia, but also in Ukraine and Belarus, they believe that a Jew, most of the Jews regard the countries they live in as theirs, first of all. So the question was, which of this list of countries you define as yours, first of all, before any other. If you will take into account the issue as Amnon Rubinstein puts it in his research, that current liberal democratic country is not just multicultural, it's also multi-loyal. In case that the current civil society and the government in the liberal democratic country does not expect or actually permits that a citizen, as far as the citizen is loyal, to the state they live in, he could be also loyal to any other country, for instance, the country of origin, of historical origin or physical origin, of course in the situation that this country not in the state of war with the country they live in the moment. That's also sort of an understanding which is accepted but by the substantial part of a local Jewish population. As I said, the overwhelming majority, they believe that, first of all, their country is the country they live in, which doesn't mean that they are not they do not sympathize to the state of Israel or the interest of their community, but it shouldn't contradict. The question is how local society accepts it. Some of the population, non-Jewish population, may accept it as something that two subjects that contradict to each other. Again, you can see here that between 6% in Russia to 20% of Ukraine only believe that interests of Israel in any case should be of priority to any Jews. 80% don't believe that. Okay, if you will compare patriotism and loyalty, by understanding all this, I asked my respondents, okay, do you agree, who of you agree that Jew, first of all, should be patriot of the country they live in, of Israel, or both? And you can see here that 45% of Russians, Jews, about 40% of Ukrainian Jews, and more than the half of Belarusian Jews, they say, okay, my country is Ukraine. Russia is my country. Belarus is my country, first of all. I'm patriot of the country I live in, okay? Again, you can see here that this multi-loyalty is shown from 1/3 to about a half of those who believe that these two subjects do not contradict to each other. And only 20% believe that, as I said here, that the same 20% that they insist on the priority of interest of the state of Israel. Taking Ukrainian case as an example, you can see here that it's also the issue of the age. You see here those who were born in the FSU, in the Soviet Union, born and grown up, the generation which actually were relatively young when the Soviet Union disappeared. You see here millennials at the age of 26 and to 40, and you have you call it generations Z, I think, you know, post-millennial generation. You see some difference between them, okay? While 60% in all Ukrainian Jews believe that their loyalty to both, less of that among those who were born in independent Ukraine or grew up in independent Ukraine. Those who were born in the Soviet Union, 100% of them insist on this point. It's pretty clear why it happens. Overwhelming majority of Jews were, those who were born after the Soviet Union or grew up or came to school after the Soviet Union, they actually accepted, implemented the idea of the local patriotism, especially taking into account the fact that overwhelming majority of them are actually children of mixed marriages, Jewish, non-Jewish. More than 70% of Jews in this generation have one of non-Jewish parents. So I would say that that's a good conclusion and should pacify their concern and negative expectations of the local society. Whether it happens, not exactly, I would say. Still, as you can see here, in the recent year, in 2018, about half, as I said, of the Russian population believe that, let us say it again, they believe that ethnic Russians deserve certain privileges vis-a-vis other society, other ethnic groups, including Jews. Concerning their Ukrainians, the level of intolerance among people under the 30 was higher than among the youngsters. However, among young respondents more often believe that the ethnic Ukrainian should also have a priority before the others. Similarly to the most recent study of the Kiev International Sociological Center. Again, let's not overestimate this point. They're saying that does not necessarily mean that they're asking to take a practical operative position in this way, in this issue. This never prevented to 3/4 of the Ukrainian population vote for a Jewish president. Okay, which also should not be overestimated. His Jewish origin was not the issue in the recent presidential elections, neither for himself nor for a majority of those who voted for him. But still, this is a very complex issue which does not permit us, to take the story very in simplistic way. Okay. I showed you this study. I could show it again, but you understand what I mean. Civil or reciprocal anti-Semitism is also a phenomenon of the recent years. The story is the following. People believe that there is a Jewish conspiracy. Some people believe, not all of them, that Jews rule the world. People believe that there is protocols of Zion elders. But these people quite often believe that fortunately this very strong force is stand with them at the moment. Here, they're able to utilize this Jewish conspiracy and this Jewish force in the interest of their own country and their own population. Some of my Ukrainian and Russian colleagues call it Antisemitism наоборот, the contra, or what is called the civil anti-Semitism, meaning that respectable anti-Semitism, meaning the Jews are very strong, they rule the world, and they should take into account this fact, and this fact should accept, and now let's think how we could cooperate with them. In case they rule the world anyway, so let's be a part of it. I live in a small settlement in Israel. Half of the population are actually Olim, immigrants from the former Soviet Union. It was a difficult story during the Second Intifada and Arab revival, Arab riots, as you know. And most of the Russian Jews, stayed, and some of the of other groups, they were trying to look for other places here. But then everything is okay, and again, people are coming to our settlement, and they settle there. It was a funny story when a new immigrant from Colombia came. So we are asking him why he's interested to be a part of the Russian, predominantly Russian-speaking community. Oh, he said, I heard there is Russian mafia here. I'm from Colombia. I know what mafia is. I want to be a part of it. It's a joke, of course, but it's also not a joke. I don't know, tell me, how to deal with this phenomenon. I really don't know. And whether you could accept it as a positive one, that this so-called positive approach to the idea that Jews rule the world, which is always accepted as a negative idea, might be a starting point for reconciliation, for self-understanding, for through the system of public education. It should be explained that it's not exactly so. As I said, is a good starting point for a better understanding of each other. Or it could be transformed to something more negative. Meantime, we think that it's. I would agree with my colleague, Kiev colleague, one of the leading sociological experts in sociology, Evgen Holovacha, who said that Ukrainians obtained a feeling of a common destiny with Israel and with the Jewish people. Let us add to that, in the hostile environment, geographically and numerically superior to the Jewish state. I'm quoting, Israel became a positive example in many fields, and this understanding was conveyed to the local Jews. And Ukrainian public administration student. I gave a course in the Ukrainian Academy of Public Administration under the president of Ukraine. One of my students told me like that. Jewish conspiracy, the cynical and very influential power behind the scenes, and very influential does exist. We have a luck that now they stand with us. So between these two approaches, there is a substantial gap. So I believe, I hope at least, that the younger generation will move to the position of Yevhen Halavacha rather than position of my student in the Ukrainian academy. Okay, so while talking about this common destiny, you can see here, for instance, that in Ukraine, many compare, as well as in Russia, many compare Israel with their Ukrainian situation. So it's very easy to accept all the allusions. If you say that Crimea is the Gaza Strip and the Donetsk and Lugansk, you know, like Judea and Samaria, so everything is clear. Who against whom? Who is the enemy? Who is the friend? Who is right? Who is wrong? This actually taken from Ukrainian internet. It's not from Israeli internet. In Russia, on the other hand, they say that, okay, but this is the situation in case Ukraine is like Israel. If Russia is like Israel, so the Judea and Samaria is Ukraine, you know, part of the motherland which is captured by the enemy. It's very difficult for Israelis not to be a part of this conflict, to explain to everybody that all these allusions are incorrect. But it's not easy to explain. For instance, like some time ago, when the American administration of Donald Trump agreed that Israel has a sovereignty on the Golan Heights, they called me to ask me to give an interview in one of the Russian TV channels, TV majors, and asked me, no, now you have to support us. Krim nash, the Crimea is ours. Okay, Golan Heights is yours, and Crimea is ours. It's the same story. I had to explain this is totally not the same story, you know. That Golan Heights, there were a Plattsdarm of at least 3 wars of Syria against Israel, aggressive wars, while Crimea was, you know, a part of territorial agreement between 2 post-Soviet states, you know, between Russia and Ukraine. So please don't take us not as an arbiters, not as an example, and not as those who should decide who is right and who is wrong. You know, we have good relations with both countries, and we left Russia and Ukraine in order not to be a part of this discourse. Okay, so please decide your problems between yourself. But it not always works, as you know. So, situation in Russia is in some way different. First of all, let's take into account that nothing tragic, nothing dramatic happens from this point of view. According to the Levada Center research, Israel's stand in Russia is quite positive. You see that in like 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, about 3/4 of the Russian population, their approach to Israel were either interest and sympathy or as to any other country, nothing special. And even more today. You see that it is more than 80%. Their approach to Israel is either neutral or positive. Thanks God. Of course, there is a difference between the years. You can see here that positive attitude dropped down in 2006, Lebanon war. Russian media were on the side of Hezbollah and Lebanon against Sahel in Israel that time. But when the conflict was over, actually the number of negative attitudes also decreased, and it stands between 15 to 20%, which is actually not so dramatic, not worse than we see in the United States, in Germany, in France, in Belgium, and most of the, in some way, in Northern Europe, anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist stereotypes are much more substantial than we can see here in the post-Soviet world. according to when we see the example I mentioned, the Lebanon War in 2006, still, despite this huge propaganda that all the time pro-Arab and anti-Israeli propaganda that was in the Russian media, still, you know, more than about more than a third of the Russian population believe that Russia should not interfere in this conflict and don't take a stand about it. And half believe in that one day it's going to be a peaceful resolution of Arab-Israeli conflict. Anyway, let's hope. Okay, so according to our Russian colleagues, you know, there is no substantial difference in concern of their attitude toward Israel. Like a fifth 20 years ago and now actually insist that their attitude changed to the best, but overwhelming majority insist that it's more or less stable, even more than it was before, 2/3. So it's okay. So that means that Russian public opinion is largely indifferent of the issue of Israeli fight with radical Arab movements. However, Israeli experience, as I said, is also became a popular brand in internal politics and in the interstate conflicts. So which should be taken into account when we understand, as we understand that it could also make some impact on the local Jews if something will go, if something will go wrong. So there is no sympathy, special sympathy to Palestinians, no special sympathy to Israelis. They either sympathize to both parties or none of them, which is pretty different from Europe, where there is more sympathy toward Palestinian Arabs than Israel, and United States, where the overwhelming majority of Americans sympathize to Israel, contrary to Palestinian issue. Okay. However, we should pay attention also that when the public opinion is still more indifferent than takes a stand on one of the issues concerning the Arab-Israeli conflict or Israel, this is not the case of the Russian media, as we can say. We have enough, quite a long list of Russian majors, like Независимая газета, Коммерсант, Лента.ру, Взгляд.ру, Свобода, Комсомольская правда, Life.ru, and Russia Today, which is the official TV channel, government-sponsored TV channel. My colleague, my young colleague, Victoria Cherachkina, a new immigrant, new Ola from Moscow, who now lives and works in Israel, she made like a comprehensive analysis of the publications and especially talkbacks. You know what's that, yeah? Under the publications, what people say. When they read an article about Israel, what is their reaction? So she came to a conclusion that first of all, positive reactions normally exceed the negative reactions. Okay, yeah, I'm going, yeah. From time to time, you see also like exclamations which could be proclamations, which could be also accepted as the positive anti-Semitism, some of them, or respectful anti-Semitism. For instance, we should learn from Jews what does it mean, how to prove that never again. Never again means bullet to the head of the enemy. Nobody to talk with, nothing to talk about. We believe so? We Jews believe in that? I'm not sure, but that's the way they see the Jewish people. Of course, open anti-Semitic declarations. If Zionism is unable to exist without anti-Semitism, which means the Jews are responsible for anti-Semitism, especially Zionists, by themselves. Okay. In the World Zionist conspiracy, still believe between 1/4 and 1/3 of the Russian public know about that there is such a thing, and however, much less believe in that. More than the half do not, which could be probably a piece of good news. I don't have more time to give more data. I would like to say a few words about how Jews by themselves accept that. Maybe one or two tables. According to recent opinion polls among the Jews, most of the Russian Jews, they mention anti-Semitism in so-called street crime. They decreased. However, the media anti-Semitism and graffiti and so on, they increased, which concern people. As you can see here, 94% of European Jews heard that from their non-Jewish parties that Holocaust is a myth. In Russia, less, but still enough, quite a number. In Russia, they also like their European counterparts, but less a little bit than them. They believe that Jews exploit the Holocaust issue for their own interests. More than 80% of our European citizens, they believe that Jews are unable to integrate in the local society. Half of the Russian public, half of the Jews in Russia heard from their non-Jewish parties like that, and so on, and so forth. And finally, maybe the last table. You can see here that 20% of Ukrainian Jews and about 10% of those in Russia and Ukraine, they believe that anti-Semitism in the recent couple of years grew up. More or less the same in Ukraine, but even more, much more in Russia and Belarus. They believe that it's substantially decreased. About 40% believe that there are no changes. But only less than 10% believe that there, as it wasn't in the past, there is no in the future. So, what is the conclusion? Conclusion, the problem is there. However, the problem is less visible than it used to be. It's a piece of bad news, but it's still there. But I believe that it's a piece of good news that education, mutual understanding, and paying attention to each issue, each phenomenon of anti-Semitism could improve it sharply. Thank you so much. Dear friends, if you have a question, yeah, yes, please, sir.
Thank you for lecture. It's very interesting.
Of course you disagree. I also disagree with my dad. We all disagree.
For example, Lithuania, I know closely 3 last year more than 2 crimes, I think. For example, digging cemetery in Chevrolet and trying cover bonus or genocide center statements after put genocide center against Grand Gochin, where genocide center say that sent Chole count Jewish to Zagare was prevent save them against violence. This total denial in repeating history. And many little things. Nobody fixes it. Nobody fixes it. It's a problem, post-Soviet problem.
So what is your question?
It is you show...
Present picture two rows, you see.
Yes, but it is, in reality, I think it is not. You agree with that, or you think...
As I said, the current picture is not so dramatic. However, that's again, this old, long, and in fact, political rather than academic discussion, whether it's hate speech or hate crime, yeah? Just hate crime, also hate speech. I would also say, I'm a Jewish, as you know, so I will answer your question by asking you another question. You know, what do you think? In case you see this phenomenon, for example, you see it not only in Lithuania, but we see it in Latvia, which did not prevent them also to vote for president with the Jewish roots, also in that country. Who should take care about that? Israel, or local Jewish community, or local civil society? Local civil society. Welcome. Yeah.
How many people were involved?
Could you raise your voice, please?
How many people were involved in the survey?
2.
How many people were interviewed or asked?
In which? In Levada or my research?
Yeah, yours.
My research, okay, 3,000 people in the 4 republics. Yeah.
So I don't know what language you did the research in, but I know at least in Russian there's the linguistic difference between ethnic Jews and religious Jews.
Let me just come to you. I can't hear you. Maybe we have a microphone, but... Okay.
Thank you. So I don't know about in the Ukrainian language, but at least in Russian there's no linguistic difference between someone who is ethnically Jewish, gay, and someone who is religiously Jewish, like Judaist. And I was curious which language you were using, and if there was any concern about, or which word you used.
Say it again, but raise your voice, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know about Ukrainian, but in Russian at least there's a linguistic difference between an ethnic Jew, Yevgeny, and a religious Jew, Judaist. Can you hear me okay?
Well, okay, we'll discuss it separately, I think, here. I didn't understand your question, I'm sorry. Not because of English, but because probably that's my personal problem. Yes, sir.
Thanks for your lecture.
Привет, привет. Давно не виделись.
It's hard to forecast changes in Ukrainian politics after next parliamentary election, which will be held this Sunday. But how do you think, is it possible that Ukraine will recognize Jerusalem as capital of Israel after new election and the formation of the new government? And how such recognition, if it's possible, will influence on the situation with antisemitism in Ukraine?
I believe that answer was given in the Pew Center research. They discovered only 5% of anti-Semites in Ukrainian society. I believe that I would give 5% that will happen, that they will recognize Jerusalem as their Israeli capital. I don't believe that Ukrainian government, which is much more interested in following the line of the European Union on one hand, and see it as a country, the economic and political interest in countries like Turkey and the Arab world, will do anything that will be against the Brussels opinion and Arab world opinion. But this has nothing to do, to my mind, to their personal sympathy to the Jews or Israel. It's just politics. So I think that it will be a political answer is no. Yes, sir.
Please, I'm from Slovakia, former Czechoslovakia, former part of Soviet Union. Please, do you have a data from Slovakia?
For Latvia? Slovakia? Well, no. But I think that will have. It's not. Yeah. It's not a part of my research. But last year, I think we had a very good lecturer who presented quite interesting data about Czechia and Slovakia. I think you can find it in the archive of lectures of the ISGAP. I'm sorry, I don't know. Other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for your time.